The very year that Mario Kart 8 came out, I did a video titled Mario Kart 9 Retro Track Predictions, and that was a while ago. And these weren't your typical MK9 predictions. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there that make their lists and usually they go with what feels good, but me, I had methodology. I understood the system. And I didn't think much of it at first, but I can now conclude the following. I was 100% accurate, as expected. I was so accurate, actually, that Nintendo could not release the game. They didn't want to be shown up by a random YouTuber with 100 subs, and that's why they opted to have Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, because they needed to buy time to make a new game from scratch that didn't have all the tracks I predicted. Have I learned anything since then? Maybe, but I'm here to give you the sequel to that video. This time, correctly labeled, the MK9 Retro Track Reveal. This is because I am confident that these tracks will make the cut, and this time, they can't possibly push back the release date of the eventual game. They will just have to deal with me being right this time. So, you may have clicked on this video assuming that this was a prediction, but this is no prediction, because I'm here to tell you straight up what tracks are in the next Mario Kart game. And how do I know? Do I have the game's source code? No. As a matter of fact, I am more confident that this list will be accurate than I am that the game is even in development right now. And if I turn out to be wrong, there's only one explanation. It's that Reggie watched this and said that someone like me can't possibly hard read their actions, so they need to change everything at the last second. Now, to address the former video on the subject a few years back, this is the better version, an updated view from a serious Mario Kart racer. Unlike your typical prediction video on the subject though, I'm here to tell you that this is a calculable process. But before we get into what will and won't make the cut, we have to understand the set of rules that we've been given, spanning for 4 games now. Rule number 1, a maximum of 4 tracks returned from any specific game in the series. This is a rule I'm very confident will not be broken, as each subsequent game has a larger pool of games to choose from. I think it's possible that we don't even see 4 tracks chosen from a game again. Rule number 2, no double dipping. So sorry to all you Coconut Mall fans out there, but don't get your hopes up on it returning. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that for normal circumstances they aren't reusing retro tracks, while there are still plenty of new options on the board. And maybe that changes once a conflict will inevitably rise that I explain later, but for now, we can still assume this rule is likely to remain in play. Before we get into the other 2 rules, let's go through some history real quick. In Mario Kart DS, we had 4 returning tracks from each game prior to add up to 16 total retro tracks. But in Mario Kart Wii, we had 5 past games, which does not divide 16. So what they did was they split the Game Boy Advance and Super Nintendo tracks into 2s, while the other 3 games remained at 4. It felt as if they wanted to rep every game in the series, but realized that the SNES and GBA tracks were more 2D and a little bit more bland, and they wanted to prioritize the others. But additionally, no repeat retro tracks came from MKDS in this game, and the maximum number of tracks originating from one of the games was still 4. So when MK7 came out, it seems we got even more confirmation of these theories. Again, there were no repeats, but they took the least amount of tracks from Super Circuit into SMK, though Double Dash tied it this time. But also notably, most of the retro tracks came from Mario Kart DS and Wii, the most recent games in the series at the time. And then Mario Kart 8 came out and things got really weird. Again, your Super Circuit, Super Mario Kart tracks had the least amount, which was just 1. But interestingly enough, MKDS had more returning tracks than MK Wii, and MK7 was tied of DS and less than that of Mario Kart 64. So before this game was launched, the pool of 64 tracks yet to be remade was only a list of 5, which was the least amount of any game going into it. So for Nintendo to choose to return the most amount of tracks from this game, it was a head scratcher. So yeah, I did a video on this exact subject already, and this was before the DLC came out, so now I have another dilemma to discuss. The DLC returned a few tracks that were already retro tracks, breaking our second rule, but I think our second rule should stay intact. It's worth noting that these tracks came as DLC, so MK8's base game still respected the no duplicates rule that we seem to establish, and my gut thinks that MK9's base game will stay the same. It's worth noting, though, that the repeated DLC tracks are all very memorable tracks in series history, and all were originally remade for, the handheld games. Perhaps Nintendo saw DLC as something a lot of people would buy if they had a chance to play some of the fan favorites. Because, you know, when getting people to buy a DLC pack, you need a little bit of pop. This is also why I think that characters like Link, Villager, and Isabelle were DLC, along with, you know, the F-Zero tracks. They knew people would buy Mario Kart, but for DLC purchases, they kind of need style points. Ironically, I'm not a fan of any of the repeated retro tracks, but I understand their widespread appeal. One was the first Rainbow Road, that's kind of self-explanatory. Another is the track that's shaped like a Yoshi. And then the last one's Baby Park, and everyone remembers Baby Park for, you know, being the hectic 7-lap oval track. So if I predict DLC for MK9, maybe I'll consider repeats. Actually, I will have to, because that's the precedent. But I think the safest bet is still to assume that they won't do repeats for a base game. And this will be a much different debate for the MK game after the next one for reasons I'll explain in a bit. The last comment regarding DLC is what it means for tracks like Neo Bowser City and Ribbon Road. They've now returned as retro courses, but not in the base game for any, but considering Deluxe came out, my gut is that these tracks won't return again. We've had plenty of time to play them for a really long time. I know they're pretty popular, but they're probably not tracks a casual player would point out when thinking of go-to MK tracks, outside of like a small fraction. It's also worth noting that I doubt they would repeat a retro track 2 games in a row. They kind of did it with SNES Rainbow Road already, but there was at least a 6-month gap where we didn't have SNES Rainbow Road in the recent game. And there would be none if we were to put a DLC track in the base game for Mario Kart 9. I believe that MK9 is a unique case when it comes to how we can predict it. I think it perhaps may be the most predictable game for retro tracks in franchise history, despite having so many questions between the DLC repeats and the questions about what they may do with the MK Tour tracks. MK8 had no questions like this on repicking already made retro tracks, which may make it seem easier to predict, but the reason I believe MK9 is a unique case is because there is an assumption that we can make regarding the tracks already, which many probably have figured out already. I could be entirely wrong though, as we did not expect 4 64 tracks in the base of MK8 for instance. But anyway, let's get back into the rules real quick. Rule number 3. Every game has had at least one retro track originating from every game in the series. So for Mario Kart 9, that means that all 8 mainline games should at least have one track representing them, and that gives us our starting points for the video. There's only one MK64 track left to be remade, that's Wario Stadium, and this means by Rule 3, we can work off the assumption that they'll bring back Wario Stadium from MK64. This brings us to the future dilemma though. Rule 2 and 3 are eventually going to contradict each other for the next game after this one, and this is because with Wario Stadium off the board for MK10, they would have to double dip to have at least one 64 track. However, today we are discussing MK9, so that will be a discussion for another time. I believe they'll eventually have to have more than 32 tracks in future base games, but I don't think it's a safe bet that it will occur as early as MK9. It's also a wonder if they would start double dipping in this game. For instance, it's possible that they will bring back, like Wario Stadium and Choco Mountain. I feel like it's incredibly unlikely, but possible. It may feel weird to only have one 64 track in an MK game, but it's also not ridiculous to consider, given that MK8 felt like a giant 64 throwback at launch in terms of item system and retro tracks. And now there's 8 games whose tracks they must account for. It's also possible they have a Mario Kart Tour track in the game. My gut is telling me that the game is different enough that they would categorize it like they do the Mario Kart arcade tracks, but given how MK Tour has caught the public eye, I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to pander to the new audience it captured. Ultimately though, the point is that N64 Wario Stadium gives us a gigantic starting point, which makes the predictions for this game unique, and it's possible that we may have the scenario again in the future now that the Double Dash and DS tracks are having their tallies run low as well. But there may be more questions in the future, such as whether or not a MK64 track will return in MK10 and onward. Finally, rule number 4. Each cup can only have one track per game in it. So what this means is that Wario Coliseum and GC and Bowser's Castle will not both be in the Lightning Cup. This rule, along with Rule 1, feels like the safest bet to hold up indefinitely. Rule 4 may feel like it doesn't matter a ton in predicting, but it actually will come up a few times and works to our benefit regarding the Double Dash and DS tracks. Because the DS and GCN tracks are running low, that's the starting point I'll take a look at. There's a lot of 50-50 calls between those two games as well. Double Dash has 4 tracks remaining and DS has 5, both have a BC, or Bowser's Castle, and a Rainbow Road left. Both have a traffic course left in Mushroom City and Shroom Ridge. The dilemma here is I doubt that they would choose both of any category. So perhaps one 50-50 will be assuming Shroom Ridge is in the game, while another may be like Mushroom City, for instance. So just to recap, our rules that we'll assume and take for granted are the following. There's a maximum of 4 tracks returning from a game, no double dipping, or taking a track twice before other tracks from its game get a chance. Every MK must be represented at least one time, and each cup must have at most 1 track from each game. Not all of these are guaranteed to stay, and the breaking of one of these could easily throw off the entire experiment, but I think that they're still relatively safe assumptions. Let's talk about some theories now. So to start, I think we need to establish what we also consider to be disqualifying criteria. You know, some tracks existing in the game would effectively disqualify others from being brought back. It's like a one or the other thing, or a pick'em. One thing I've noticed that in the selection of MKDS through MK8's retro tracks, there's been at most 1 snow or ice track, 1 desert track, 1 traffic course, 1 haunted track, or like 1 jungle course or something. And this seems to be a general rule, but it doesn't seem to be a certainty. But what this means is that if like 1 icy track or something is in the game, it probably means that there's not going to be another one as well. So, you know, disqualifying criteria. You choose one and a one only. Lots of times multiple circuits are brought back, which makes sense as that's the most common type of track. In MKWii, there's 2 Bowser's Castles that were brought back, though one was a 2D one and one was a 3D one. The real head scratcher is that Peach Beach and Shy Guy Beach were both brought back in Mario Kart Wii, and it's hard to wonder if this is just a one-time thing, but it feels generally pretty safe to assume that if a track like Toad's Turnpike is in the game, that we likely won't see Moonview Highway returning just for the sake of variety. It's also worth noting that a snow or ice track, a desert track, a beach track, and at least 1 Mario circuit have returned in every game so far. It seems like tracks featuring the same music are very unlikely to return at the same time as well. It's happened twice before, but both times were in Mario Kart DS and featuring circuit tracks. My guess is that 1, this is because they brought back relatively simple tracks for their first go in MKDS, you know, the first go of 32 instead of 16 tracks. And number 2, Mario Kart DS's retro formatting was very strange compared to the other games. Every cup followed the same order from, you know, the first track being from the first game and the 4th track being the 4th game. And this is something that hasn't returned since. Regarding music tracks though, I really like this theory now, given that there were 4 tracks that returned of 5 remaining from MK64 and Mario Kart 8, and the only one that didn't make the cut, Wario Stadium, shared music with Royal Raceway, one of the tracks that did make the cut. It would have been very easy to have a double dip here, but they didn't. And after Mario Kart DS, they had 4 64 tracks sharing the same, you know, general circuit theme out of the remaining 12 from the game, and they have not put any 2 in the same game once. So, you know, Mario Raceway was in Wii, Luigi Raceway in 7, Royal 8, etc. As mentioned, since there's only 4 GameCube tracks remaining, we have to start thinking about tracks like Wario Coliseum. What makes this weird is that we're already assuming that Wario Stadium is returning, but I actually think that this is not a disqualifier. It was actually a lot more common than I expected for tracks featuring the same character to return in the same game. And actually every game has featured at least 1 pair, and usually there's 2. In one case, they brought 2 of these tracks back in the same cup, so there's truly no limits. These tracks are all pretty different to each other in some way, even though, like, you know, the Luigi Circuit tracks have the exact same name. The retro BCs from MKWii are very different, and the 3 Mario circuits in MKWii all somehow have different names. After looking into it, roughly half of all character-themed retro tracks share a game with another retro track repping the same character as well, which I found surprising. This makes me think it's entirely possible that Wario Coliseum makes it in, but I still think that only 1 of DS Bowser's Castle or GCN Bowser's Castle will get in, and that goes with the Rainbow Roads from those games too. And the same goes with Mushroom City and Shroom Ridge, and because of the music argument, I think it's pretty likely that only 1 Figure 8 circuit and DS Mario circuit gets in. One thing I also noticed because of the GameCube tracks is just how few Special Cup tracks have been brought back up to this point, and it made me wonder if they're intentionally choosing easier retro tracks than new tracks, because, you know, of the 9 remaining Double Dash and DS tracks, 5 of them, so over half, are from the Special Cup, and they've completely ignored the Super Circuit and Mario Kart Wii Special Cups up to this point. So I took a look at the tally of tracks from each cup through our first 64 retro tracks. Because there's 4 cups, you'd expect about 16 from each. Because the Lightning Cup existed in Super Circuit, the expectation drops to 15.5 from each of the main 4 cups, but that's not really impactful. The results are as follows. There seems to be a clear downward trend, but it could just be a coincidence. So I then went through the games and went cup by cup and track by track to grade how difficult the track selection is supposed to be. And if it were balanced, a cup by cup score would lead to 40 and race by race 34. Here's the results though. So it turns out that I was right on this thought because the first 3 games all were easier than what would be expected, but 8 actually seems to balance this out, and this may be because after the first 3 games, the pool of remaining tracks naturally had to be from the more difficult cups. And I think that this is a coincidence, but it means that our expected score for Mario Kart 9 still may be slightly skewed in favor of harder tracks, but not as much as MK8 was. This makes sense because the remaining tracks to choose from, in 64, Double Dash, and DS, are biased towards the Star and Special Cups to begin with. I don't think that easy tracks are the pattern for the future, because that leads us to situations where only harder tracks remain from certain games. What this could mean though is that tracks from other games may be slightly more likely to be on the easier end, since some games have to play catch up on Special Cup courses. The last thing to acknowledge before actually starting to predict is if there are any patterns or behaviors to look out for that we could see already, and I think the answer is likely not many, but there may be a few. The easy one is we've now had Rainbow Roads come back in the last 2 games in a way that looks like a very intentional order. Because of how intentional it feels, it makes me feel like we can probably expect GBA Rainbow Road to follow suit. There's a special bias for Rainbow Roads as well, so I would say that I'm actually expecting it to come back. Hot take, not really. There's another more obscure pattern I've picked up on as well. From the last 3 games now, we've had the last track in the Star Cup. From 2 games ago appears the 3rd track in the Lightning Cup. This includes DK Mountain in MK Wii, Airship Fortress in 7, and Grumble Volcano in 8. This would suggest that Maka Woohoo could be next up, but for some reason I have a really hard time visualizing Maka Woohoo in this grandiose spot before GBA Rainbow Road. And especially if it came out on the Switch, I feel like this would be a really underwhelming end to the Retro Cups. Maybe it's because Maka Woohoo will forever live in infamy after the glitch in MK7's launch. This didn't start with GBA Bowser Castle 3 being an MKDS, however, but as mentioned, Mario Kart DS did have a weird retro selection. It couldn't have happened though, since GBA tracks were listed 3rd in the cup order in that game, always. But it would have been a really interesting theory if they had chosen Sunset Wilds over Sky Garden, since Sunset Wilds was the 3rd cup finale in that game. I think the string will probably be broken in Mario Kart 9 because unlike the Rainbow Roads, the pattern feels unintentional. It's worth noting that we've seen patterns like this before. A lot of people had SNES Mario Circuit 4 or GBA Bowser's Castle 4 to be locks for MK8 because the first 3 tracks of those 4 were in the first 3 games with formal retro tracks. And this ended up not being the case. Delfino, Square, and Coconut Mall also started a pattern that 3DS Mario Circuit did not continue. I also think that Maka Woohoo is unlikely to continue this because we have 4 other older games that are already behind in Special Cup tracks already, and they need open Lightning Cup spots to fill. So finally, let's talk about potential predictions, or what could be a reasonable prediction. And I encourage you to post your list in the replies, but just keep reasonable guidelines in mind, or else I'll be coming after you in the comments section. You can guarantee it. I think we can start off by saying it's a reasonable assumption that we'll have N64, Wario Stadium, and GBA Rainbow Road in the game. And what makes GBA Rainbow Road interesting is that it actually eliminates GCN and DS Rainbow Road from our discussion board, making the GameCube and DS track pool even smaller than they already are. It's entirely possible that GameCube tracks are completely wrapped up in Mario Kart 10. It's likely even. And in this world, it's almost a certainty that GameCube's Rainbow Road goes to MK10. And this is interesting to me because I have a hard time believing that they could place, GCN Bowser's Castle anywhere but in a Lightning Cup slot, which makes me think that they're going to bring it back in MK9. Really, the only slots I could ever see GCN Bowser's Castle being at are the 3rd track in the Lightning Cup, and maybe the final track of the Leaf Cup. but I really don't see it being anywhere but Lightning 3. This would again break the theory from just a minute ago, and just being unable to see Maka Woohoo here makes me think that this makes sense. I think this makes either Mushroom City or Wario Coliseum pretty likely to return in the Leaf Cup, with the one that doesn't make it doing the same thing in the next game after, or MK10 as we would call it now. If you take a look at the remaining DS tracks, we now have a dilemma, because there are 3 DS tracks left on the board, assuming we don't see Bowser's Castle or Rainbow Road due to us working on the basis that we've selected a Bowser's Castle and Rainbow Road already. Because 2 of these 3 tracks are circuit tracks with the same music, and me really doubting that only one of them returns, this makes me see Shroom Ridge as almost a certainty to be added. Obviously they could choose something different, but I feel like it's a pretty good bet. And that would make Wario Coliseum the pick over Mushroom City, because we'd be choosing a traffic course in Shroom Ridge already. So here's a quick look at what we would be visualizing here. Red is what we're deconfirming, which usually means we're confirming another track in green. That would, be a disqualifying criteria to a corresponding red. In this case, since we've taken a Bowser's Castle and a Rainbow Road, I've redded out the remaining ones, and same goes for Moonview Highway and Mushroom City, because we took Shroom Ridge. In yellow, we have some tracks that I think are unlikely to make the cut in this scenario because of something we've done, but I wouldn't deconfirm it. For instance, Woohoo Loop feels like only half a traffic course, but I still feel like it would be unlikely if we choose Shroom Ridge. And Wario Shipyard hasn't done anything wrong here, but with 2 Wario tracks already, I think a third one would be unlikely. All the 2T Bowser's Castles are in yellow because I don't think they do another, but as MKWii established, there's a timeline where it can happen. And Mount Wario should be yellow too for this reason, and maybe it's waiting for MK10 to fulfill the Star Cup finale theory. I've also yellowed certain DLC tracks. This is because these tracks are simply kind of weird as they come from outside the Mario universe. These tracks felt like DLC for a reason, because, the pop thing, you need people to want to buy it. And for this reason, I feel like they have less of a chance than even other DLC tracks like Dragon Driftway that features like a Galaxy boss, or Super Bell Subway, which is themed after 3D World. So unless Link being in the game becomes the norm, it's hard to see Hyrule Circuit returning. The 2 blue tracks represent a pick'em. This is where one but not both will eventually be selected. I want to see where, more conclusions will lead to potentially finding a better fit between these 2. And these kinds of decisions may lead to different kinds of outcomes entirely, because what tracks do make the cut likely affect the other ones. So just naturally, we filled in a lot of potential Leaf and Lightning Cup tracks, and I think this is kind of the normal starting point for MK9, because as a result of our earlier discussion, these kind of tracks need to play catch up to begin with in this game. So what immediately jumps out as the next step to me is to put Dry Dry Ruins in from Mario Kart Wii. And this may seem kind of weird, but this is because not only has every recent MK had a retro desert track, but also because Mario Kart Wii is falling heavily behind in cup balance with only 9 tracks to go. We've already crossed off the other 3 tracks from the MKWii Special Cup, and it'd be pretty awkward to have 6 to 8 tracks remaining with an entire cup left, since we've established that tracks from the same cup can't come from the same game. So it makes a lot of sense for it to come off the board here, which will allow us to update our chart further. This is pretty much where I start feeling less confident, however. I would not be surprised if I got 5 of these 6 right in the end, but you have to start working based on an assumption you have to make around this point from here on out. I think since it's pretty likely that Wario Stadium or Dry Dry Ruins will end up in a Lightning Cup slot, we can turn to the Mario Kart 8 tracks to start considering what may result in the last Lightning Cup track. The reason why I think this is a relatively safe idea is because the most recent MK games tend to have the most amount of retro tracks in them. So if there's only 3 in the game, it is likely that one will be in the Lightning Cup, and if there's 4, it's a guarantee. Given that DLC courses result in the pool of MK8 tracks being twice as large as the next highest remaining pool of tracks to choose from, I think it's actually pretty likely that there's going to be 4 MK8 tracks in the game. Meaning, if that's a valid assumption, we would have to pick one for every cup. So since Cloud Top Cruise is the only special cup track that makes sense, I think that's a pretty decent shot of being our 7th track. And I'm not sure why, but I feel kind of good about this one. There's a few tracks in the MK series that definitely set out to reference the main series or something related to the developers. This includes Delfino Square from Sunshine, or Cloud Top Cruise and Galaxy. DK Jungle was in MK7, which had the same Retro Studios developing, I think, that did DKC Returns. And I think a similarity between Delfino Square and DK Jungle was that they returned in the first game they were eligible in, and I feel good about Cloudtop Cruise maybe being similar. So for whatever reason, when I made my MK8 predictions offline many years back, I felt really good about Jungle coming back, and I got that one right. So call Cloudtop Cruise a hunch. Now, this is weird, and I can't explain why, but it feels like they do this every game. But I'm going to not just hard read Cloudtop Cruise being in the game, but actually it being placed outside of the Lightning Cup. And for some reason, Nintendo EAD likes to neglect their original track difficulty rankings and change their minds. For instance, Wario Stadium was Cup 4 in MKDS, and TikTok Clock was in 3. They flip-flopped in MK8. DK Jungle was in the Special Cup and moved all the way down to the Banana Cup in MK8. But it's not just MK8 where this happened also. They swapped Jungle Parkway and N64 Bowser's Castle in MK Wii. In MKDS, they flip-flopped Choco Island 2 and Koopa Beach 2. And though from different games it makes no sense as to why Dry Dry Desert and Toad's Turnpike are where they are in MK8 given their original slots. What I'm saying is that I'm hard reading one of the tracks from the popular MK8 Star Cup to be in the MK9 Lightning Cup, and if I'm wrong, it's because Nintendo EAD watched this video and wanted me to be wrong out of spite. And I think this track will end up being either Dolphin Shoals or Electrodrome, but for whatever reason, I'm predicting Dolphin Shoals because I feel like Wario Shipyard may be somewhat unlikely, and because Nintendo hates me. This is one of my first big reaches, but you have to make them to really fill these out to begin with. It's not a fully solvable puzzle, and more so there's a lot of branching paths when you have to choose a 50-50 sometimes. Some of my favorite tracks in the series are the ones that are really abstract in idea. MK8 brought back a lot of these tracks, including Music Park, TikTok Clock, and Ribbon Road. These are the kinds of tracks you can't visualize being real accessible places, but the problem with them all being used up in Mario Kart 8 is that there aren't many left to really complement MK9's retro selection. This is why I think one of the tracks originating in MK8, Sweet Sweet Canyon, would fill the void for now. The other example that comes to mind is Dragon Driftway, but as a DLC track, that would be in one of the later cups. It doesn't really feel as likely to me. So I think this is where you can start filling in the Shell Cup. This leaves a ton of options from the Flower Cup, DLC, or even Sunshine Airport to take a potential 4th slot of the last Wii U track, and that's if we decide we want to have one. And I think it's likely we do, since there's 25 potential MK8 tracks to pick from, and you have to get started eventually on that 25. I'm going to discuss the blue again now that things are really starting to take shape. And even though there's likely a higher chance that Figure 8 Circuit makes the game over like Toad Circuit, I think I'll actually predict Toad Circuit makes it as the first track in the Shell Cup. This is because I think in this scenario where Dolphin Shoals is in the game, Cheep Cheep Lagoon isn't, and because Dry Dry Ruin seems likely, I'd pass on Shy Guy Bazaar also, both from the same cup as Toad Circuit. Passing on Figure 8 Circuit now means it's very likely to be in the next game, but I could see them putting it off and choosing the DS Mario Circuit now, because they technically don't have to choose Figure 8 Circuit. Every game with Retro Track so far has additionally had a returning Mario Circuit, and now more than ever looks like the right time to use this course. All earlier MCs have been used outside of MC4, and the ones coming after have time to wait. In the case of Wii Mario Circuit, you could easily fit that one into the Shell Cup if needed, like MK8 did with the GBA one. So there's lots of flexibility. With Luigi Circuit, they don't have to worry as much because 2 of the Mushroom Cup tracks have already been used in Mario Kart Wii, and Toad's Factory can definitely fit into the Banana Cup slot if need be. For MK7's Mushroom Cup, though, none of the tracks have been used yet. That doesn't mean that they have to use one here, but I could definitely see Toad Circuit or Daisy Hills being used here. I don't think it'll be Daisy Hills, though, since it would make more sense to pair with Figure 8 Circuit, I guess. What I'm guessing is that it'd be likely to see Daisy Hills and Figure 8 Circuit paired together, or DS Mario Circuit with Toad Circuit, but that's not a guarantee. I just think it would make sense to use Toad Circuit now so you don't have to think about it as much later, and it would be more convenient for them to leave F8C available for future games to not backload the harder cups of every remaining DS track. So I think that the Mario Circuit, or DS Mario Circuit, Toad Circuit timeline is potentially more likely to knock out your easier circuit and harder circuit track. So now we have 11 of 16 selections, and the last 5 possibilities may make you wonder where we should start. We know that in this timeline, you're likely to see more Mushroom and Flower Cup tracks return, and I may even move 64 Wario Sam to the Leaf Cup as well, where it may fit more naturally as a Star Cup track. The reason why I've had a banana is I expected us to use a lot of Special Cup tracks, but it seems that I've now eliminated the majority of them anyway at this point. To make additional progress though, I think we should consider what strings of possibilities are feasible and think about our distribution already and what we still need. We have our Mario Circuit now, and we have an easier circuit track and Toad Circuit, which would follow how 7 and 8 did things. We have our desert track that I feel very good about. We even have a traffic course, and that leaves us with a few options. First, there's almost certainly a snowy course remaining that we have to pick. That's pretty much a lock on one of the remaining spots. Sweet Sweet Canyon gives us a more abstract styled course, and there's not many other options there, so I feel decent about that one. Tracks like this tend to be fan favorites, but there's also another type of track that tends to be a fan favorite too, and there's usually a course or two that is a more, man-made type of track. I don't know how else to explain it, but this would be tracks like Coconut Mall or Daisy Cruiser that came back in MK7, maybe Mushroom Bridge or even the stadium courses, which we already have. So I think it'd be pretty likely to see one of those kinds of tracks. We have no haunted course either. Those are not guaranteed to make the cut, but there's actually a decent pool of remaining ones, making me see it as pretty likely. And the only one looking unlikely is Broken Pier, given our relatively, filled harder cups. We don't have a pure beach course, though Dolphin Shoals does give us a water track. Seeing as they've brought back 2 beaches before or done similar stuff, I would not rule out a second one. And the last thing that is weirdly missing is the outdoorsy type of track. Something like Donut Plains or Moo Moo Meadows, a place where you can touch grass, I guess. And as an extension, there's, at least in the last few games, always a jungle or forest course, it seems like, so that's another pattern to consider. I've tried to categorize the remaining potential tracks here, and maybe not so surprisingly, most of them actually fit into one of the categories that we need to fill. So here's the list. There are a lot of potential routes to go here. I do have some hunches. I'm locking in the 12 course to be a snowy track just because we literally always have one. And I also strongly believe that course 13 will be some kind of outdoorsy course, whether that be one of the jungle tracks or one in the touched grass category. I also believe it's possible to see one from each, but I would not see that as a lock. Course 14 I'm going to call as a ghostly track. History suggests that this is no guarantee, but looking at our list and how many options there are just fit, I find it very likely that one of them, outside of Broken Pier, finds themselves a spot. And this will then isolate 2 spots for, one of the man-made courses, maybe 2. A potential second outdoors track, or maybe even like a beach course. One other thing to note is that the distribution by game is still a factor that we have to consider. I think we have to select at least 2 tracks from one of Super Mario Kart or Super Circuit, which is tough for us because usually these games are harder to predict. I feel good about it being 1 and 1 from this point on though. We need a SMK track to begin with, and while it may feel unfair for SMK to get 1 and Super Circuit to get 2, I think it's unlikely for only Rainbow Road to come back for the Game Boy Advance tracks. And I also find it unlikely that only one Wii and 3DS track would get in also. That would actually be unprecedented. So that would leave one other track left, which I would chalk up to being either another Wii U course or potentially even a little bit of a MKSC celebration, given that its Rainbow Road is coming back and having a third one from that game. Our starting point here is definitely either the Wii tracks or the 3DS tracks. If you're a careful observer, you might notice that there's only 2 Wii tracks on this list right now. So in terms of the scarcity arguments from the beginning with, the GameCube and DS tracks, this is where you begin here. It may seem weird to force a Wii track if there aren't many options, but keep in mind that there's a large group of them that were available that we've just eliminated already. So in a sense, Toad's Factory and DK Summit just have heightened odds of being rolled right now. I didn't know what to do with Daisy Circuit. It's entirely possible it gets in, but it still technically is a circuit track, and for a lot of reasons, it doesn't feel as likely as these 2 that are in the easier cups to begin with and fit our categories better. Similarly, I don't have much faith in Maka Woohoo being back either for reasons that aren't super explainable. This leaves us with Rock Rock Mountain and Rosalina's Ice World as potential options. Ice World, like Maka Woohoo, is one of your later cup tracks, but unlike Maka Woohoo, we still have a need for a snow/icy track. It's also similar to Dry Ruins because, they're both in cups where not many tracks have been used and a lot of them have been eliminated already. But unlike Dry Ruins, it has DK Jungle in its cup, which has already been brought back. So I would only give it an outside shot of being in. The assumption is that we have one remaining track that's a Wii U track, but I don't think it's a guarantee, because if you think about MK8 itself, in the base game we thought there would be 4 3DS tracks, since it was the most recent game, but there were only 3, and instead there were 4 MK64 tracks, including, 64 Rainbow Road. So like I mentioned, I could see them selecting a 3rd Super Circuit track as a mini celebration of that game. The only thing making me think a 4th MK8 track is still likely, though, is just that 25 tracks as opposed to 16 3DS tracks, that's just a lot. So in short, I see the following options as likeliest. This right here is just a list of how many more tracks that we need from this point on with the 11 we have right now, and how it's most likely to end up. So let's go off the Wii tracks. What happens if Toad's Factory is in the game? Well, there are a lot of permutations and possibilities, and this goes for DK Summit as well. The crazy part about this is even if I were to get the first 11 tracks right, there are tons of other combinations that they could use that aren't even on this list. Matter of fact, there's more that I'm missing than I have on here, and here's where I must sadly admit that I don't actually have the list of 16 tracks. It was simply clickbait. I know, you all can't believe it. But if there's one thing to take away from the video, it should be how to come up with a reasonable prediction, and that is what I will be making here. It is hard to get 100% accuracy because they could decide to just put in SNES Bowser Castle 1 spontaneously, because why not? I mean, they could put in Excitebike Arena again for all we know, but let's attempt to guess as many right as we can. My first prediction is that Rock Mountain will be our 12th track, and the Course of Nature in the Great Outdoors. This is partly because there's a big need for a track like this in terms of variety, but also because the alternatives seem to be Maka Woohoo or Rosalina's Ice World, which for reasons stated before may not have the clearest path given that we have very few Leaf and Lightning Cup slots left, and you can put Rock Mountain almost anywhere. I also think that this makes sense because unlike Ice World, it would fit along Toad's Factory or DK Summit, and additionally, I find it hard to believe that they would finish off the Donut Plains track so quickly. At this point, getting the last 4 tracks would require a bit of luck, but here's my next thought. Of all the remaining tracks that feel like they could fit, Riverside Park and Ghost Valley 1 feel like the best fits for the Shell Cup, which still needs 2 slots filled, so I'll go with these 2 because they help with our variety and track type, and also are good for the Shell Cup. This could lead us to a situation where we choose Toad's Factory and Ice Outpost, but I feel like DK Summit is much more likely to return in the Banana Cup, let alone return in general than Ice, so that'll be our snow track and the 15th on the list. This leaves us with 1 remaining Wii U track to fill the Banana Cup spot, and given that I selected Rock Mountain and Riverside Park, I think that this would make tracks like Flomperoons and Shy Guy Falls less likely, and now we have Twisted Mansion off the list because of Ghost Valley 1 as well. This leaves us with a pick'em between Toad Harbor and Sunshine Airport, or maybe Cheap Island if we wanted a beach or water track, maybe Super Bell Subway. But I think weirdly Riverside Park is similar enough to Cheap Island that they probably wouldn't pick both of them, so I'm going to go with the pick'em between SA and TH. Maybe I'm wrong, but hey, we're probably not actually going to get to the point where I have 15 out of 15 at this point anyway. My last selection is going to be Sunshine Airport though, because I think it's a fan favorite that they may use in an opening trailer to sell people on the game. And 2 games in a row they used a fan favorite track from the recent game in an opening trailer, so it would not surprise me if they go this route with Sunshine Airport, or even Cloud Top Cruise to be honest. So that is giving me my official MK9 Retro Track prediction. You can see it here. Before I wrap up, I want to offer a few alternative lists actually. As dumb as it sounds, I feel like there's a better chance I actually go 16 for 16 somewhere rather than getting 15 of 16, unless it's like Toad Harbor and for Sunshine Airport. It would be really insanely low probability, but the point is that one track differing can affect the rest of the selection. For instance, what would happen if they decide to randomly pick Bowser Castle 1 instead of Ghost Valley 1? It seems like something that could happen since, 64 BC and BC3 were both in MKWii. But in that case, here's how it would affect things. I would replace Sunshine Airport with Twisted Mansion to create a new spooky track in GV1's place. I would then probably put in Toe's Factory to create one of the building/facility courses, since Sunshine Airport would be gone. And then I would replace Riverside Park with Snowland, since we'd be choosing TF over DK Summit as a snow track. In summary, it's a puzzle, and when one piece changes, the others may not naturally fit around the new piece. So to wrap up everything, I'm going to show a few other options that I arrived at, just changing a few things. Like what would happen if we went back on the DS circuit pick'em and chose Figure 8 instead? There'd be a lot of changes there. What if we felt that Mario Kart Tour tracks may not return at all? Well, we'd have to use some of the Woohoo tracks. So some of those possibilities are going to be brought up here. Finally, I will do a sequel to this video eventually, but it won't be really just like retro track predictions as much as it will be just like what I would call a likelihood chart. And this would go over every potential option and talk about how likely it is. So it'll be slightly different, but about the same subject. And of course, if the game actually is announced and we learn some information, I'll be updating this video again when that happens. So that's all I have for now. Thanks for giving this a listen. It's always a fun little project for me to kind of go through all the possibilities and all of that. I've always really enjoyed it. So hopefully it won't take too much longer. Probably will, but hey, why not? It's just for fun anyway that we do this. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.